So welcome back to the third part of this mini-series, and this is going to be the section that's all to do with parts work, right? Probably something you've heard of before, and this is probably the most, for whatever reason, at least the way that I see it, the most famous part of therapy, the one that you see on Instagram, like inner child healing and like healing old parts of you, all that kind of stuff, right? Which is great. It's a great modality of healing. However, the reason why I made this mini series is because it's only one part of the healing. You have to know about introjections and you have to know about projections first. Not necessarily first, but you need to know about those as well as this, right? And we'll get to that, the reason why in a minute. But for those of you who don't know, what we're going to be talking about here is something called split ego states, aka parts. I refer to them as split ego states in the method that I teach. And they're essentially different parts of you at different kind of ages and perspective that make up this version of who you are right now. Like how I am right now, I have different parts of me at every age that are kind of still active, and maybe they're inhabiting where they should be, maybe they're inhabiting where they maybe shouldn't be, right? But there's all this kind of symphony of different voices within me. Now, this gets important because when you talk about issues like procrastination, we'll take procrastination for an example, which is very common. A lot of the time, if you look at this through a kind of psychological or therapeutic lens, right? If you put our therapy glasses on, a lot of the time, this is because there's a part of us which is stuck at a certain area or perspective on life, where maybe they can't see how this action that they're about to do might suck right now in the beginning, but if they do it enough times over a long time, it has a delayed gratification. Delayed gratification is a more mature way of looking at the world, right? So if there's a part of you which is in charge of this area of your life that can't quite comprehend or understand delayed gratification, then it'll make it very difficult for you to do work that has delayed gratification in it, right? So we're going to get into how this applies to you right now, who's watching this, who's like, I want to heal, I want to do this properly, and I want to make sure that I can get over whatever this block is that I'm experiencing, right? So first we have to understand that split ego states or past work is by far the most complex part of this mini series, right? So I might even do like a few videos on this, but for now I'll just stick to one, right? And the only thing that you really need to know that's relevant to you, otherwise it'll be too much information, is that at some point, if there's a part that's acting out, right, within you, it's because there's a part inside of you that was walled off from the rest of you at some point, right? Because if it was integrated within you, then it means that all the different parts of you would be able to help and guide it, and and if it's more mature, it might be able to help and guide you, and it would be able to work in tandem with everything, rather than something being isolated and being split off. That's when things like this issue with procrastination can happen, because it's not able to access the rest of you that can understand delayed gratification because it's walled off and separated, right? Um, Also, if you have any IFS training, so internal family system, or any kind of other system of parts work, I want you to just right now, just leave that to the side right now. Because the problem with that, if we want to look at the projections video again, is that there's all of these different parts that they systematized it. Like there's the fireman part, there's the protector part, all this kind of stuff, right? All of this is a projection from the person who created it, right? This might annoy some people, but I have to say it, right? Instead, when we're working with parts, we want to meet whatever is happening inside of us as it's happening inside of us. And spontaneously, if we realize, oh, maybe there's a part that's protecting, or maybe that's a part that's trying to put out a fire, right? Then we can, deal with that accordingly. However, if we are presupposing that these things are already there, then that will just create much more complexity than there needs to be, right? So that's a little caveat that we have to go into. If you don't know anything about that, then just don't worry about that because we won't be talking about it. So what is a part? We just talked about what is a part, split ego state. It's, there's this ego state right now, Aaron, which is the majority, and it has lots of different ego states within it, right? That's what generally what an ego state is, right? Now we're getting into what does this mean in terms of the healing, because that's the reason why you're watching this miniseries. Well, what this means is that sometimes, whilst there's this whole symphony within me and it can be working together and all that kind of stuff, at the same time, there can also be parts that split off, right? So for you, what this means is the first step we need to do is identify, well, how did this split happen, right? This is the most important part. Again, just like introjections and projections, you need to start to realize, how did this get here? And with a split ego state, it's in some ways it's easier because it's literally like you can view it like another person, just stuck at a different level or a different stage, right? So you can have a conversation with it, or you don't even have to have a conversation with it like that. You can then be like, well, how old does this feel? Okay, it's around 7 years old. Okay, so like I was saying, you have to realize how this problem got here, how this split ego state got walled off, right? So you start with a how question. How did this happen? How did this get walled off within me, right? Which also needs to be explained here is, first of all, the way that you tell the difference between an introjection, a projection, and a split ego state is, first of all, watch the introjection and watch the projection video, because I've made those first for a reason, right? How you know something is a split ego state is when it kind of generally feels like you want to do something, but there's something else that feels like it wants to do something else. So the characteristic of it is there's a split, right? There's one side here that wants to do this and one side here that wants to do this. Rather, with an introjection, it much rather feels like there's an insecurity. With a split ego state, it doesn't necessarily feel that way. Like I don't necessarily feel afraid of this, but it just feels like there's something which is making me go in a different direction, right? And with a projection, you feel frustrated and angry, which is a mask for feeling powerlessness, because you're projecting your power outside of you. So of course you feel powerless, right? This is how you tell it's a split ego state, or how you can kind of gain fluency in how you gain fluency in telling between the two, in telling between the three, excuse me, is by just going out and practicing. And sometimes you get it wrong, right? So we know what a split ego state is now, and we know why in this context it's causing a problem, because it was walled off, right? Now we're getting into the how of how to heal this, right? And the first question is, well, how did this get here, right? So you go back and you look at, how did this wall off happen? An example of this is maybe when you were younger and you liked to play video games, right? And every time that you played video games, it was kind of like cool, it was fun, it was spontaneous, all this kind of stuff, right? And now growing up, you still have all that reward system, right? But because this part was a kid and just wanted to have fun, he wasn't able to understand that maybe it might be good in the short term, but if I do this excessively, it's not going to lead me anywhere, right? Again, delayed gratification, or being able to project things into the future, right? Something which is hard for people who are younger to do, because they don't have that sense of time and that sense of scale, right? So this leads to someone maybe procrastinating with video games, right? This is a split ego state that got walled off. And then because maybe he was shamed by his parents or by society, like playing video games is for losers, felt like he couldn't talk to the rest of, he couldn't get advice or rely on anyone. So he just walled himself off. So like now he just plays video games, right? So now that we know that something got walled off and we know how it got walled off, the last part of this is to reconcile and to integrate. So the introjection healing path is to release and let go. The projection healing path is to re-own. And the split ego state itself is to integrate, reintegrate it into the whole, right? So I'll give you a very simple way to do this. I got this from Gestalt, also from Ken Wilber's 3-2-1 method, right? So it's not something I came up on my own, but it's kind of a mix of everything, which is, let's say I'm sitting here, you go and you get a chair and you sit over here, and then you place it over here, right? And right now, this is you. This is you with everything, with all of the rest of you sitting down here. And over here, you imagine that this ego state is sitting. And then through this kind of role play, you just have a conversation. So you can have a conversation. Hey, I think you're doing this. Hey, I think you're doing this. And then when it's time to switch perspectives, which is something I advise you to do just to see, because how you integrate is you have to be able to perspective shift. This is super important. Now on a call, one-on-one call with my clients, this is something which, I walk them through. And I also do, or something they just do naturally because they have someone that's guiding them, right? So on your own, you have to be a bit more intentional, which is why it's a little bit more difficult, which is why I'm keeping things as simple as possible. And despite doing that, it's still a little bit complex, right? So you then get up and you move into the other chair, right? So you move into the other chair, and now you are speaking from that part's perspective, and you're speaking to yourself, right? And when you're doing that, and the physical change, because humans, they organize through time and through space, and they usually organize through space first, right? That's why we have so many spatial metaphors for time, like the middle of the week, or like how far ahead is it? Talking about like how far ahead are they in time, right? It's all spatial metaphors first, right? Which is why we can utilize that. We can use it kind of as a neuro handle, which is like a neural handle, which is basically a term where you can use your neurology or is neurology the right word? I'm not giving the best impression right now, but yeah, neurology, right? A way to powerfully use the human brain, basically, in order to be like, oh, if we use this concept a lot, aka space, then let's use this in therapy to make it easier to visualize or make it easier to feel embodied, right? So you move over to the other side, and from here, when you're in this person's perspective, your main goals in general, not just in this person's perspective, is to be like, okay, so we know there's a divide. What is keeping this divide here? And in order to understand that, you have to see your reservations. So in this example, someone's reservations could be, well, this part of me has wasted so much time. I don't want to let it back into the rest of me because it's just going to waste time, right? So there's a fear around there, wasting time. Then when you role play into this other side, it's like, oh, this person has isolated me for so long. How can I open myself up to this person if they don't have a track record or trusting me, right? So we have two different points here, and there might be more. And it's part of your job in this process to come to a reconciliation, right? The same way that you would with a friend or someone that you love, or maybe even something in a professional setting, right? You have to come to an integration there, right? And the lubricant which does all of this almost effortlessly for you is something which I'm going to get into the last video of this series or the next video of this series. I'm not sure if it'll be the last video of this series, which is holding unconditional care and love for yourself, but also the other parts. Right now, the other video, we're going to get much more into depth about how to actually do that, the common blocks and misconceptions and what this actually means, right? But how we heal this divide is for us, because we're most likely the more mature person in this discussion within ourselves, is we have to extend an unconditional love and care to this part because that instantly creates trust, right? Which is usually the reason, a lot of the reasons why there's a lack of integration here. So that's the lubricant which helps everything. However, there's still a certain amount of talking and allowing yourself to just have that conversation within yourself. And that does a lot of the integration for us, right? So you keep on having a discussion. You keep on getting to the point of what the contention is and resolving that, right? That again deserves its whole other video. But essentially, that's the nuts and bolts of what you have to do. Is you have to see, okay, what is this ego state? How do they get walled off? Okay, first two steps. What is the ego state? How do they get walled off, right? And then third step, what is keeping it walled off? And then this is one vehicle, one technique, which is super practical about how to actually stop that walling off from happening. Because like everything, it's a continuous process. It's not something that's static, right? Shadow work is not static. It's not like, oh, this one thing happened to me 10 years ago and now it's just there. No. Your body is an ecosystem. Everything is an ecosystem inside of you. It has to continue to keep on going, right? It's like if you plant a seed somewhere and then 10 years later it just grows into a tree, It didn't happen by accident because there's water, there's food, there's nutrients. The same thing with shadows and shadows and traumas or limiting beliefs, right? They constantly have to be sustained. So it's always about how did it get there, and then what is keeping it sustained. And if we know what's keeping it sustained and how did it get there, we can always reverse engineer it, right? And in this sense, the reverse engineering is reverse engineering the walled off part and reverse engineering the points of contention that are keeping this division happening. And then the last part is once there's no more points of contention and there's no more division, we give, a few minutes, 5 minutes to just sit with ourselves and allow the integration process to happen like this. And we can do visualization, we can pretend, we can think that we're going to hug it, or we can just sometimes it's a very somatic feeling for people, just allowing things to mold into each other. Other times it's very cognitive, right? We give it as much time as it needs to allow that integration process to happen. And that is how you deal with split ego states, right? Again, it's a very complex topic. This is just the most common and a big general framework and principles, big picture of how to actually deal with that, right? And ego states, alongside the other shadow work, once you have an ego state integrated, it's no longer disintegrated, you just have so much more energy because you're no longer fighting against yourself. And a lot of the time, the areas which were your biggest weakness actually become your biggest strength. Because now, the reason why it was your biggest weakness is because you were fighting against yourself. Now, not only are you not fighting against yourself, but you're actually working in perfect harmony with yourself. It just leads to a massive personality change almost overnight, right? However, the actual process is not necessarily an overnight process. It can happen like that, but there's a reason in my one-on-one coaching why I always say to people, most people will end up working with me for about 6 months to 12 months, 6 months to 2 years. And over that process, there are a number of different big personality changes, right? And those are the mentors that I work with as well, the same thing, right? But the processes sometimes take a little bit of time. But when they do, it's just an instant personality change almost. And other people other people feel it. All the time I have clients that say, oh, my friends or, possibly new girlfriends and all that, or boyfriends or spouses, they notice that there's something different about me. I become more attractive and more open, all this kind of stuff. And it begins with allowing yourself to see what's going on inside you internally and healing that, right? So, like I said, the next video is also super, super important. In some ways, the next video might be the most important of all of them, which is about how to actually develop unconditional self-love and self-care. What are the common pitfalls and what are some of the common misconceptions that get spun around in the spiritual community or the self-help community about what self-help actually is, about what self-love actually is. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. I do actually get back to the comments. I'm waiting for them. I'm more than happy to go back and forth a few times and give really detailed one-on-one answers. If you need a little bit more support, I do have a Calendly link in the description below, which is a 30-minute quick informal chat between me and you, where we see where you are on your journey and how I can help with that. If you're not ready for that quite yet, then just follow this YouTube channel, and there's a lot more kind of great informative videos which I will be posting for free here, obviously. And otherwise, thank you for watching, and I'll see you very soon.